June 5, 1944. Saint-Mireglise, Normandy, France. The moonlight pressed through gaps in the clouds, painting the quiet fields silver and blue. Across the hedgerows, a thin layer of mist clung to the ground, ghostly, just above the dew-soaked grass. In the winding lanes beyond the village, American paratroopers crouched low, their equipment rattling softly as they checked and rechecked each weapon, each satchel, each slender hope that morning might come. "Don't write me as a hero, Mom. If I don't come home, tell them I was scared, but I did my job anyway." Inside a dim tent, Private First Class Samuel Turner wrote by the flickering light of a lantern. The scratch of his pencil seemed loud in the thick silence. Outside, somewhere past midnight, Lieutenant Robert Harris, commander of the 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment, ran through last-minute instructions with Sergeant Ellis Grant: "Stick close to the hedgerow, watch the flares. Any sign of artillery, double time west to the church." Turner's hand shook. He touched the folded letter he'd already sealed. Already addressed, Mrs. Linda Turner, Dayton, Ohio. A single sheet, 3 paragraphs, written in uneven lines. His last letter. Around him, the air prickled with tension, heavy with the scent of canvas and gun oil. The first revelation, Turner's letter wasn't only goodbye. It hid precise information, enemy movement signals he'd seen that day, woven carefully between the lines as an afterthought for the officer who read the mail for censorship. In June 1944, Allied forces massed along the English Channel coast, poised for the largest amphibious assault in history, Operation Overlord. Saint-Mireglise, a tiny crossroads town, would be among the first objectives. German forces, knowing the Allies would strike soon, flooded valleys, mined roads, strung wire across meadows. American and British intelligence relied not only on formal reports but also hurried missives, chance encounters, field rumors carried by quiet voices under blackout conditions. Turner's calm in the letter belied the numbers: his regiment, 2,065 strong, scattered across a dozen drop zones. In Saint-Mireglise, the German 91st Infantry, roughly 750 men, dug in by the graveyard and railway lines. The weather, light rain, 56 degrees Fahrenheit. Turner's covert note: the stone archway is guarded after sundown. Light shifted twice on the western farm lane, gave the Allied command a last-minute correction to their outdated map. Perspective shift: elsewhere. Captain Helen Markham, assigned to intelligence processing at the 82nd Airborne HQ, sorted the soldiers' last letters before the invasion. She noticed Turner's unusual phrasing: signal after midnight, 2 flares then 3, just like training, only with thunder in the distance. Strange, thunder in the distance? Why would he write that? Markham muttered, passing the letter to her supervisor. Markham's curiosity would prove pivotal. In the context of that time, it was rare for censors or clerks to catch operational hints. Most letters were routine, formulaic expressions of hope or resignation. But Markham's sharp eye, in a sea of anxious goodbyes, picked out Turner's words and flagged them for urgent review, a move that ran counter to normal practice. Of the 152 letters she sorted that night, less than 1% held anything beyond basic personal news. But Turner's, with its coded thunder and specific times, stood out. Supplies thudded in the dark. Orders hissed between rows of tents. Every detail, every word, mattered. The silent minutes before dawn hung heavy with the lives of men poised between luck and fate. But as dawn crept over Saint-Mireglise, Turner had no idea that his words, quiet, hidden, barely noticed, would set in motion a chain of decisions that, within hours, would spare the lives of hundreds. What happened next depended on a single letter that reached the right hands just in time. 3 hours later, at Saint-Mireglise headquarters, Captain Helen Markham placed Samuel Turner's carefully worded letter onto Major Charles Dalton's desk. The faint blue light of morning filtered through the canvas windows, illuminating stacks of field reports and handwritten notes. Dalton picked up the letter, his brow furrowing as he read, signal timings, reference to thunder, the strange mention of shifting lanterns at the western farm lane. The cautious message, hidden amidst Turner's last words, felt urgent. Dalton's fingers traced the underlined phrases as Markham explained their suspicion. "It's odd, sir, Turner's details match the map updates, but he's describing movement patterns we haven't confirmed. If the Germans shifted sentries, it could change our drop route." Dalton nodded. "Notify Harris. Rewrite the approach vector. I want patrols to watch for flares and count sentries. Triple-check artillery positions west." The new revelation, Turner's embedded observations clashed with earlier intelligence, which showed minimal activity near the stone archway. Dalton's orders set off a chain reaction. The regimental staff and signal runners scrambled to adjust plans. Secretaries and code clerks cross-referenced Turner's numeric signals with intercepted German transmissions. By 7:30 a.m., the coordinated effort had revised the parachute drop zone for Harris's entire company, over 500 men. Private First Class Martinez, a radio operator, struggled to suppress doubts. "You trust a censored letter over full intel, Major?" Dalton replied, "Turner's in the field. He has no reason to exaggerate." The tension escalated as Harris distributed new maps and procedures. Each squad recalled the drill: 2 green flares, move east, 3, hold position. The radio crackled with updates, reshuffling drop points to avoid the stone archway, Turner's warning zone. Harris paced, boots echoing on the muddy plank floor. This could mean the difference between ambush and escape. We adapt, or we lose. In the technical breakdown, the intelligence section compared Turner's timing references to German artillery cycles. Their analysis revealed a 2-hour window when enemy patrols left the archway unguarded, a critical flaw in German defense. Markham's attention to detail allowed the command to schedule the regiment's central push exactly within this window, avoiding the heaviest crossfire. As dawn brightened, Private Lynn Carter recounted, "We'd rehearsed that route a dozen times. When the maps changed last minute, fear spiked. I thought we'd gotten it wrong. But Grant just said, if Turner's right, we live. If not, we see hell before breakfast." The broader implications were clear. Turner's coded observations, delivered from personal experience and relayed through a single letter, altered the course of a massive operation. Instead of 51% casualties expected in the initial report, Harris's regiment faced less than half, with only minor injuries in the stone archway sector. The major reveal: by 9:15 a.m., the paratroopers landed northeast of St. Mireglais, bypassing the ambush. Turner's warning changed their fate. Reflecting on the moment, Markham later wrote, his words, clumsy, heartfelt, almost missed, saved half our regiment. I wonder how many lives were tucked between those lines. Within 20 minutes, Dalton's amended instructions would reach the next division, stationed south of the churchyard, where Lieutenant Camille Rousseau awaited orders. Meanwhile, a new piece of mail, another soldier's cryptic note, would soon bring fresh urgency to an already uncertain dawn. In the cramped, sandbag-lined command post south of the St. Mireglais churchyard, Lieutenant Camille Rousseau scanned the latest dispatch, her gloved fingers trembling slightly as she decoded the urgent message relayed from Major Dalton. Bypass the stone archway. Confirmed enemy presence, shift landing and rendezvous point north by 200 meters. Sunlight was just beginning to glint off the shattered church spire as Rousseau's unit of 112 paratroopers prepared to move. The letter's influence rippled outward. Sergeant Ellis Grant, the gruff veteran who'd marched alongside Harris through the harsh winter at Bastogne, clapped Turner's friend, Private Ethan Mills, on the shoulder. "You hear this? Turner's letter." That's the difference between a slaughter and a clean run. Mills barely managed a smile. The memory of Turner, hunched over his last letter hours before, returned in sharp clarity. He always saw the details others missed, Mills muttered, checking his pack one more time. The new development, as Rousseau's unit advanced toward the revised rendezvous, scouts spotted the dim flicker of 3 German flares in the pre-dawn haze, Turner's predicted pattern to the minute. The realization hit fast. The German patrol had doubled back to the exact spot that would have caught the paratroopers' original drop zone in a devastating crossfire. Ellis Grant relayed the ominous message, "Hold position. Scan for machine gun nests at the orchard fence." Turner was right, they're waiting for us. The squad crawled forward, mud and dew soaking through uniforms. Above, the drone of Allied C-47 signaled the main drop had begun. The same coded vigilance Turner had practiced, teaching new recruits to spot the unnatural quiet or the angle of a lantern swinging at midnight, now became their mantra. Mills recalled Turner's words from training, pattern first, noise second. Every 5 minutes, check for the odd one out. In those tense minutes, that lesson separated caution from catastrophe. Technical reports confirmed the Germans had installed 5 additional µm-42 nests along the farm lane, their overlapping fields of fire positioned precisely where Turner had warned. A comparative glance at casualty statistics later that day showed Rousseau's platoon suffering only 4 wounded, compared to the 37 lost by another regiment that landed a kilometer south, unaware of the updated intelligence. Tension mounted as the group finally made their dash across the orchard. Flashes erupted just behind them, tracers and shouts tearing through the fog, but missing their mark by precious seconds. Lieutenant Rousseau's voice rang out, steady and clear. "On your feet, now. Turner gave us this chance, move." The unit surged forward, adrenaline and gratitude mingling in every frantic heartbeat. Immediate impact. By 10:12 a.m., Rousseau's group reached the Allied rally point with minimal losses, their survival owed directly to the concealed warnings within Turner's last letter. This moment of triumph, short and breathless, echoed through the scattered units across Normandy. For the men and women who lived it, the realization settled in. One soldier's bookish, nervy attention to detail, a single, overlooked letter, had already saved hundreds from the slaughter that morning. Within the hour, word of Turner's code would spread along the 508th's battered line, where Captain Harris now prepared an urgent message to headquarters. What happened next would determine whether this tactical victory could be turned into strategic momentum before dusk fell across Normandy. At precisely 11 a.m., Captain Robert Harris stood in the muddy clearing outside his hastily erected field HQ, the battered remnants of Turner's letter clutched tightly in his fist. The sharp whistle of incoming mortar rounds punctuated the air, each explosion sending shudders through the earth. Harris glanced at the sky. Allied aircraft soared in staggered formations, streaked with the white trails of anti-aircraft fire. Around him, radio operators relayed updates. Rousseau's platoon secure, minimal casualties. Grant holding sector, waiting on further orders. The atmosphere was electric with tension. Medical tents overflowed with wounded, while supply jeeps rumbled past, their tires splashing through crimson-tinged puddles. The numbers in Harris's notebook, now hopelessly smeared, were improving. Instead of the projected 51% casualties, updated figures whispered of less than 10% in Turner's old drop zone. Harris paused, then spoke quietly to his adjutant. "Whatever else happens today, that letter did more than save lives. It reshaped the battlefield." The new development was swift and unexpected. As headquarters relayed Turner's coded warnings to another Allied column headed toward La Fire Bridge, a decrypted German message arrived. The translation was chilling: increased enemy anticipation, suspect breach in operational security. The Germans, too, had noticed the changed patterns, and began shifting their reserves west, planning a pincer movement meant to trap the 508th and Russo's battered unit. Lieutenant Russo, catching fragments of radio transmissions between sprints, barked a warning to her squad. "We're not safe yet. Germans are adjusting. Prepare for counterattack at the western hedgerow. Tell Grant and Mills, keep your heads low." The urgency crackled in her voice. Technical details from the radio section confirmed that German reinforcements consisted of nearly 300 troops and 2 Panzer IV tanks. Analysts at Division HQ mapped out the likely engagement zone, a narrow, muddy lane bordered by decades-old stone walls, the same lane Turner referenced in his letter's fatal caution. The escalation was palpable. Sergeant Grant, battered and hoarse, organized a defensive line between the old stone arch and the hedgerow. "Dig in. Ammunition left, grenade center, range markers set every 10 paces." The platoon knew their chances depended not just on numbers, but on the warning that had threaded its way from a single soldier's memory into their battle plan. As the first treads of the panzers rattled the ground, a voice called out above the chaos, "Private Mills," almost laughing with disbelief. If Turner could see this, he'd say the numbers never lied. For a beat, the line held. Concrete data fueled hope. By recalibrating their lines per Turner's map notations, the 508th inflicted higher than expected losses on the first German wave, 15 enemy soldiers neutralized, 2 armored vehicles knocked out with PIAT launchers, and their own line holding firm. The comparative analysis was already clear. Units without such adaptive intelligence suffered triple the casualties that morning. But as shellfire pounded the hedges and word spread that supplies were running low, Harris made a split-second decision. He ordered the last reserves to reinforce Russo's battered right flank, risking his own command post for the chance to break the encirclement. Within 30 minutes, the survival of the entire 508th would rest on whether the small defensive knot could hold the German push and keep the bridge open. And just as noon bells chimed from what remained of St. Mireglai's church, one last coded message, from a fallen comrade's pocket diary, would surface, offering both hope and a final, desperate strategy for the group's survival. The next act would demand everything they had, as the day's outcome shifted on fragile, handwritten words. The toll of St. Mireglai's battered bell hung in the air as noon gave way to an afternoon of desperate calculations. In a smoky cellar near the shattered church, Captain Harris gathered his battered command, Russo, Grant, Mills, each face cut with grime and exhaustion. Across the table, Sergeant Grant pulled a blood-stained pocket diary from the kit of Private Tom Benson, a runner lost in the morning's crossfire. "There's something here, sir, Turner's handwriting. It's another note." The revelation hit like another salvo. The diary included sketch diagrams, a narrow ditch, concealed tree roots, a rough tally of German patrol intervals, and one cryptic line, "Use ditch if flare pattern reversed. Supplies hidden at Oak Barrel, 30 steps north." Turner's meticulous observation, invisible to all but the trained, the desperate, or the lucky, had just handed them a lifeline. Russo read aloud, her voice trembling. He tracked not just their patrols. He buried rations, water, morphine, ammunition, at every fallback spot. Fresh hope surged through the ranks. Grant barked, "Mills, take 5, check that barrel. Bring everything you find. Move." Within minutes, Private Mills and a fire team, using Turner's notes as their guide, dashed through sniper fire to the marked Oak Barrel. Inside, they found 4 canteens, 6 bandages, and 2 unopened boxes of .30 caliber rounds, enough to resupply the front. "He planned for the worst," Mills muttered. "And it's saving us now." The technical breakdown, Turner's system, prepositioned supplies, mapped in the margins of unofficial letters, increased the likelihood of unit survival by over 40% in wargame simulations later reviewed at division headquarters. No other regiment in the sector displayed such contingency planning from a single enlisted man. The mood shifted. Rousseau's platoon, shored up by fresh ammunition and clean water, steadied their battered line just as the German pincer attack redoubled. Mortar rounds slammed into the lane, but armed with Turner's map and fresh supplies, the defenders repelled 2 frantic waves. Grant's section accounted for another 17 enemy casualties in under 30 minutes. "We lose this ground," Grant rasped, "we lose the bridge. Remember who got us here." Anecdote swept through the Allied line of Turner's obsessive note-taking, his paranoia about hidden paths, the way he would walk the perimeter twice before dark. He was scared, Mills admitted, hands shaking as he unwrapped a canteen in the firelight. But he was scared for us. That's what mattered. The larger theme emerged: in war, the smallest details, an extra ration, a scribble in a diary, can outweigh entire strategies. For the men and women fighting that day, the myth of the lone hero exploded into the reality of teamwork, humility, and acts of unsung foresight. As the sun dipped, the battle for St. Mireglais whirled toward its climax. Word arrived: the German line was breaking, thanks in large part to Turner's foresight. But new orders were already in transit. Allied command demanded a push toward the La Fire Bridge by sundown, with or without artillery support. In the cellar's dim light, Harris looked out at the battered survivors. "Turner brought us this far. Now it's our turn to finish the job." Within the next hour, the decisions made in the heat and haze of battle would decide not just the fate of 500 men, but the bridge, the operation, and perhaps the war's entire trajectory. All eyes turned west, toward the looming bridge, and the final challenge that awaited beyond. By late afternoon, the battered but determined survivors of the 508th advanced cautiously toward La Fire Bridge, their eyes fixed on the smoke and dust coiling in the distance. Captain Harris, bruised but unyielding, led the column, Turner's letters now passed down like sacred texts, each word a shield against the chaos. As the unit reached the outskirts of the bridge, reconnaissance reported a German counterattack gathering strength behind reinforced artillery. The final revelation emerged: Turner's last known communication, a brief but urgent note recovered from a fallen comrade, outlined an alternate route, an unguarded path beneath the ruins of a collapsed barn, submerged in knee-high water, overlooked by both sides. The note described it as the Shadow's escape, an ancient cattle track if the bridge fell. Harris paused amid the thrum of approaching gunfire, reading the note aloud. "If the bridge falls, take the Shadow's escape. It's our only hope to regroup." His voice was steady but grim. This hidden knowledge would become critical in the hours ahead. As German tanks and infantry prepared their final assault, Rousseau organized a rear guard. Grant and Mills checked weapons one last time, their faces etched with exhaustion and resolve. The human element, men fighting not just for orders but for each other, defined their stand. Technically, Allied engineers had tried reinforcing the bridge all morning, but bombardments left it perilously weakened. Structural reports later showed the bridge would collapse under sustained tank fire. The alternate route Turner had detailed was the difference between encirclement and survival. The tension crescendoed as shells rained closer. Harris signaled the retreat through the shadow path just as the first German tanks rolled onto the bridge, sending it crashing into the river below. The narrow, waterlogged track beneath the barn saved hundreds, allowing the broken remnants of the regiment to slip away under cover of dusk. Analysis of the engagement later concluded that Turner's discreet intelligence, the hidden letter, the coded phrases, the mapped fallback options, was responsible for reducing Allied losses by nearly 60% in the sector that day. His foresight turned a potential massacre into a tactical withdrawal, preserving lives and fighting capacity. As the surviving soldiers regrouped in the dark, whispers of Turner's courage spread, not as a fearless hero, but as a quiet, careful observer whose last letter had charted a survival path for 500 men. Captain Harris later summarized, "It wasn't loud gunfire or bold command that saved us. It was one soldier's letter, patient, deliberate, and hopeful, that saved lives." That letter became the frontline shield for every man who read it. And so ends the story of a soldier's last letter, a testament to the power of words, courage, and the silent acts that shape history.